Angel of Mercy. Many people should understand the concept of an angel of mercy, but I am sure they believe that these people only exist in movies and fiction. The odd one has appeared throughout history, but they tend to get relegated as the exception rather than the norm.
Nobody asks you to do what you do. You take away their right to choose. You have no right to do that to anyone. You think you're an angel, but that's not the case. You're twisting facts to fit your face. You're feeding the need. You lie to yourself, you're no saving grace. You're not helping anyone. Death and destruction is all that you want. You don't deserve the space. Take a look at your face.
The Angel of Mercy. Many people should understand the concept of an angel of mercy, but I am sure they believe that these people only exist in movies and fiction. The odd one has appeared throughout history, but they tend to get relegated as the exception rather than the norm. Even then, these people have only ever been caught after decades of repeated offending behavior. So, just how many never get caught? The TV series, Dexter, highlights the prevalence of serial killers in society, but the aim of this podcast is to focus more on psychopathy in our community. When people think of psychopaths, they immediately think about serial killers. Sadly, the prevalence of psychopathy in our community is higher than most would like to believe. As many as 1 in every 22 people demonstrate psychopathy. When the subject of this week's podcast came up, I thought it would be both an easy and a valid concept to convey, yet when I started to work on it and break it down, I realized that it really wasn't that simple or easy. I have had several attempts at starting this podcast and had to abandon it, asking for Spirit to show me the way. Please stick with me to the end, as there are some very key statistics about psychopathy in our population, and you may find them surprising. I am a spiritual mentor, and my main focus is on spiritual concepts. I want to help bridge the gap between spiritualism and science. I want to help people understand how spiritual influences, both light and dark, are all around us, constantly influencing what we do each day. The way I work with Spirit is being open to receiving images, thoughts, songs and impressions that can appear randomly in my mind. I have to somehow piece them together and make sense of them, so that they can be presented in a logical manner. This kind of inspiration has been spoken about in folklore as having a muse. In spiritualism, we call it connecting with our guides and angels. In order for me to work and get the inspiration and messages I need from Spirit, I need to get into the flow state. When the inspiration for this week's podcast came through, I had a mountain to climb, finding a way to present this so that I did not appear SHT crazy. Even now, I know that many will refuse to entertain such a concept, not because it is a falsehood, but because they just won't accept the prospect that they deal with these people on a daily basis. So much truth today is presented as fiction. It seems like it is the only way to get some messages into people's consciousness. Some even say that truth can be stranger than fiction, and guys, sometimes we just can't make this stuff up. Most psychopaths are very intelligent and move towards white-collar crime. I see a system built to protect intelligent criminals, and they know how to manipulate people and exploit the failings in that system to their advantage. So, after another very difficult and stressful week, I will present another story, a follow-on from the podcast, Exit Point. I can only present this content as fiction and from a position of someone who is grieving, someone who is trying to make sense out of a needless and sudden death, a death that should not have happened, and one that could have been avoided. While Roli may only be a cat, he was a living soul and an important part of our family. His death highlights a potentially serious issue. I am aware there has been a sharp rise in sudden deaths among the collective. Some may believe that we are in the biblical end times, and this is God's way of sorting the wheat from the chaff. I have seen many channels claiming to be spiritual, those who have prophesied that those who are not ready to ascend will be removed from our society. So, just what does removed mean? I heard some say, death through natural disasters and/or other methods. But then I also heard those channels promote Archangel Lucifer as the savior. Some await rapture, and Dolores Cannon suggested that there would be walk-in souls to replace existing consciousness. I would prefer to go with Dolores Cannon. Deaths are on the increase, but that detracts from the subject of this podcast. Indoctrination and propaganda leads the way, and, in today's society we have lost our sovereignty.
Lies that are hidden a killing machine.
After finishing the podcast called Exit Point, I was exhausted, emotionally drained, and ready to move on. I thought I had reached the crest of the wave, for grieving Roli's passing. My last memory of him was, while very sick, him showing love and affection, purring and indicating that he was happy and wanted to come home. I left him, feeling in my heart that he would make it back to us. That what he needed was a few days treatment, then he would be home again. It is a memory based in love and one I will treasure. Having been so close to death myself, and coming back, I understand just how quickly the body can recover, so long as the soul hangs in, while the body has the opportunity to heal. And being predicted to die, I also know that many miracles can happen, should our Creator allow it. The experiences I spoke of, in the Exit Point podcast, are true and valid. But we rely on non-interference of our free will, and that the support our body needs will be given. Doing the podcast helped me to grieve. All cried out, I was ready to let it go, and move on. I had resolved to myself that he made the choice that was right for him. I cried all the way through the writing and production of the podcast, so I had finally found peace, some free space in my mind. After I watched the podcast on the big screen and cried again, I had a flash memory of the vet refusing to reconnect Roli's medication before I left. At that time, I was given a nudge from Spirit to ensure she reconnected this before I left. But she told me that she wanted to get him settled in his bed space before she went home. That after seeing me out, she would come right back and reconnect his medication. It did not occur to me at that time that this wouldn't happen. I was tired, upset, and didn't want to make a fuss. I then got the impression that Roli's choice had been taken away, that something or someone had intervened. I cried again, thinking about something else that had happened, when I made the decision to go to the clinic and check on him that night. I was then reminded of how many times I lay in hospital, ignored by nursing staff. How many times I had been left by nurses who told me they would come back in a minute and switch my drip back on. How many times this was never done. I cried again as my heart broke. Had she left him all night without his medication? If so, he just didn't stand a chance. And what I'd heard when I hung up the phone was true. I was going to kill him with kindness.
You lie to yourself, you're just a killing machine.
At first, I thought I had met an angel of mercy, and that somehow the vet had convinced herself that either we hadn't been taking good enough care of Roli, and he would be better off dead, or that he was going to die, that he had an underlying condition, and that I was too weak to make the decision to put him down. So, to end his suffering, she made that decision for me. Out of some perverse and twisted need to feed the urge to kill. Before I left the clinic, she refused to reconnect his medication. She told me that she wanted to get him settled in his bed space, after she had seen me out, assuring me that she would come right back and reconnect that medication. It is my view. She left the clinic that night without doing this. A simple mistake, or so it could seem. Roli's medical records noted that while he had not deteriorated while in the clinic, about 8 hours at that point, I had been advised that he may not make it through the night. They noted my attendance and then clearly annotated that cost was an issue. The vet had abused the financial estimate given for treatment and had exceeded the agreed amount for 2 nights of care. She had already overspent, and we had words about this when she was determining just how much I was prepared to pay to save his life. She wanted an open ticket for £600 ICU treatment per night with no indication of how long he would need that level of care for, or in fact if he could go back to the clinic the following morning for less expensive, ongoing support. His records then said he was found in his bed space gasping in agony the following morning. I had to ask why, if he was medicated, would he be found gasping in agony? He should have been given enough pain relief and sedation to ensure that he would not suffer through the night. When I left him that evening, while he was very ill, he was content and purring. He had shown me that he wanted to come home, and that told me he had the will to live. The complaint response said he had taken a dying gasp and this was normal. However, his notes stated he died sometime after this. They lied. Having spoken to this woman, I found her to have a false sense of empathy. It did not sit right with me at the time. We call these people dark empaths. They voice empathy, yet they lack any true compassion or emotion. I have only ever met one other vet that gave me such a dark impression. However, I have met many more of these people in the corporate environment. But still, at the time, I did not suspect that Roli would be left all night, without medication. Why would someone be that cruel? It did not make sense. Then I spoke to the Royal College of Veterinary Surgeons. The concerns that I had raised about the level of care leading up to Roli's death were serious enough that it could lead to a vet being struck off. The only saving argument would be that he had an underlying condition, he didn't respond to treatment and that resulted in his death. That meant he had to die. In reality, saving his life and an apology with a promise to ensure it never happened again would have been enough. But, it is my experience that when you are dealing with someone who lacks true empathy and compassion, they can't process information in the same way as others who do have these emotions. When I look at his medical records and events leading up to his death, I see key failings in his treatment. There were 2 prior occasions when, if he had been given better treatment, he never would have got to the stage where his life hung in the balance. Even after the first failing, on the second visit he should have been admitted and given better treatment for his infected paw. I suspect that even just cleaning his paw could have saved his life. The complaint response stated there was rarely any benefit to cleaning a cat's paw. I have to call bull SHT. I am not sure you would want to hear my reasoning, but I have gone over every detail of this, and I keep arriving at the same conclusion. He should not have died. I submitted a formal complaint to the vet and I am not satisfied with their response. They blame me for his death. Non-existent missed appointments and a failure to follow instructions that were not given. Of course, I understand that denial is part of the grieving process. And yes, I feel guilt that he should have had better care in the last few weeks of his life. And yes, I am aware that people generally feel the need to shift blame and transfer guilt, but I am not one of them. I have always taken responsibility for my own actions, but I cannot take responsibility for the failing of others. Sadly, I believe that most people lack the ability to question the information that is being presented to them. The balance of power and authority is quite often skewed and it can be pointless to even try to fight a system that seems rigged against us. I have found, especially with medical negligence, the level of protection for these professionals is exceptionally high. They can quite easily kill patients and walk away without suspicion. Vets put animals to sleep on a regular basis.
You lie to yourself, you're just a killing machine.
It is certainly not an aspect of the job I would like.
Look in the mirror, what do you see? Nothing good that is coming from me. You lie to yourself, or is it just hypocrisy?
But I do understand why at times it may be necessary. I don't believe it is right that anyone suffer at the end of their life. But withholding treatment, especially when it could save a life, is pretty despicable. But, what is a cat's life in relation to a vet's career? The vet had already established that I had restricted funds, and so it was unlikely that I would pay for an autopsy. She tried very hard to convince me that there was another reason for his illness, but I am well aware of what was going on with Roli, both in terms of his care at home and the failures of the vet clinic. I declined the autopsy because I knew what had killed him. I I didn't see the point in paying the vet a fee to justify his death in some other way. I knew if his death was as a result of a failing in their treatment, they would never have admitted this. I have since learned that the autopsy is done by an independent party, and I was not told that at the time. I deeply regret not putting him in the freezer, instead of burying him. But even then, would the results have been conclusive? Maybe not. People will want to believe that I am grieving and have an overactive imagination. That may well be the case, but I am also more intelligent than most. I see and understand more, and I ask more questions than most people. I genuinely believe that I would be a much happier person with a lower level of intelligence. Most people will not dare to question the opinion of a professional they deem to be in a higher position to them, but I will not accept something unless it makes sense to me. Do I get everything right? No, absolutely not, but I am capable of, and need to understand many things. As I have said, I have abandoned this podcast on a number of occasions and came back to it, because there is an important underlying message. I just hope people can join the dots, read between the lines, and start to pay attention to what is happening around them and within our community. Most people want to believe the best in others. They can't imagine that there are people that enjoy hurting others for sport, or who will do whatever it takes to look after their own best interest. No matter how many people suffer, how they get hurt, or how many heads need to be stood on for them to achieve what they want. I began this podcast stating the message was about psychopathy in our community. Most people believe it only applies to serial killers, yet it is far more widespread. I have already noted that 1 in 22 people are said to show traits of psychopathy. Maybe we should look at the definition of psychopathy again. Perhaps what is more alarming are the top 10 professions psychopaths choose. Stay tuned for these statistics. They are positions of trust and roles that people would turn to in a crisis. A person who has traits of psychopathy takes pleasure in inflicting pain on others and likes to blame their target for the suffering inflicted by them. Merriam-Webster defines a psychopath as a person having an egocentric and antisocial personality marked by a lack of remorse for one's actions, an absence of empathy for others, and often criminal tendencies. Source: www.merriam-webster.com/dictionary/psychopath. There are at least 2 other potential scenarios here. 1. I am still grieving and trying to make sense of a bad situation, perhaps even trying to compensate for feelings of guilt. I have created a version of reality for myself to invent a story to make me feel better. A valid concept, but I don't feel any better. If I hadn't gone to the clinic, there would be no justification for the medication to be switched off. If anything, it makes me feel worse, thinking that I gave her that opportunity. We also took Roli to the vet, and we trusted and relied on their expertise to treat Roli properly. They made mistakes. Had he been treated properly, we would never have got to this stage. 2. The vet looked at Roli's records and realized that they had made a massive mistake, and the only way to ensure they would not get sued for negligence was to allow him to accidentally die. Then, if they did an autopsy, my view was they could claim there was an underlying condition, or we were just too late in treating him. She already questioned me about just how much I was willing to pay to save his life. If I wasn't going all out for treatment, then it is unlikely I would pay for the autopsy anyway. I have never known an owner pay for an autopsy for their pet. Farmers, yes, but generally I am not aware that pet owners do this. So, was this woman an angel of mercy? If facing an angel of mercy, you will see someone who smiles, someone who is very pleasant, and who appears very empathic and supportive. But if you looked behind their back, you would see a very big and very sharp knife. When you're faced with an angel of mercy, you are dealing with someone who doesn't think like most people. They have a thirst for harming and killing others. It's psychopathy, but they confuse this with kindness. They will tell themselves that what they are doing is for the benefit of their target, even the family of the target. They tell themselves that they are killing out of love and compassion, and that it's the right thing to do. The truth is, they are feeding a need to kill. Most serial killers start with animals, but then they move on to people. This person could have quite happily gone home that night, leaving Roli without his medication. No doubt, expecting him to be dead in the morning. She could just tell her colleagues and boss, Roli's owner came in last night. I had to disconnect the drip so she could pet him. Another call came in and I just forgot. The veterinary clinic would cover for her because they don't want to be sued. Even if we pushed for an autopsy to confirm the cause of death, I thought at the time, they would be in control of what was recorded on the results. In a situation like this, I think that it is unlikely they would tell the truth. Everything just gets swept under the carpet. Quite often, it is not about what is legal and correct, but what can be got away with, and proven. I really did not want to believe this, or even consider that it could be the truth of the situation. I initially dismissed it. I told myself I was just reaching for a resolution to my own pain. The past few years in my life have been exceptionally difficult. The past few months, traumatic. Roli suffered with the disruption and changes in the home. I did not blame Roli for not wanting to come back. With deep regret, I was ready to move on. In trying to reconcile this scenario in my brain, I asked Spirit and the universe to give me a sign to show if this crazy suggestion was true. A short time later, I switched on YouTube and 2 recommendations came up. One was a tarot reading. My reading selection told me to trust my intuition and in particular my clairaudience. The second was a podcast about female psychopaths. If you can't accept that nothing is truly random, that spirit can influence these things, then on this occasion I will not disagree. Of course, YouTube works on algorithms and artificial intelligence. It uses machine learning, which keeps surprising us with its abilities. Perhaps, the YouTube algorithm analyzed my last video content, Exit Point, and made a connection with female psychopaths. In consideration of all factors, I now feel calling this woman an angel of mercy was far too kind. A blatant psychopath is much more like it. Did I just contradict my podcast, Exit Point? I suppose in a way I did. This was still an exit point for Roli, but perhaps the underlying message wasn't fully understood at the time. Oh no, I hear you say, that would never happen. What a terrible suggestion. You're mad, you're paranoid, you're something else. There are so many ways to rationalize why this story could not be true. People make mistakes, it is a human condition. However, while some will take responsibility for their actions, they are a very rare breed, and are very few and far between. When facing being caught out, many will lie, they will do anything they can to divert attention away from themselves, usually by blaming someone else. In discussing my feelings with my ex-husband, questioning the psychopathy, he agreed. He had drawn the same conclusions. He works in a care home for people with dementia. He told me that he is sick of seeing some of the things going on. He reminded me of a resident who choked to death on a cupcake. The police were called in to investigate, but nothing could be proven. No one could figure out how the woman got the cake. He then followed that up by saying she would have to leave her room and go into the locked kitchen to get it. He didn't believe she was capable of this. The only way she could have got it was if someone gave it to her. Of course, we would like to believe she stole it, but we just don't know. It is also human nature for people to hide their darkness. Another man was refused access to a doctor and died soon after. While in hospital, I almost died after a doctor failed to appear, and about 2 weeks later, while in intensive care, I begged the nurse for help, telling her I was dying, only for her to walk away. I awoke with her in my face following resuscitation. My family were told that I was not expected to survive. Multiple resuscitations followed, and another major surgery. People just don't want to see the potential for the true number of people displaying psychopathy in our community, so I am sure these are all innocent mistakes. When people think of psychopaths, they immediately jump to the assumption that they are only serial killers and criminals. While this is not an incorrect assumption, perhaps the incorrect assumption is the failure to see just how common the prevalence of psychopaths and psychopathy is within our community. These are people who enjoy inflicting harm and pain on others, They thrive on power and gain this through manipulation. According to www.psychologytoday.com, mortality rates stay the same or decrease when doctors go on strike. I'm not suggesting that all doctors are psychopaths, and this could be explained by the cancellation of surgeries, etc., but I note this is a long-standing statistic. Here are some eye-watering statistics. A recent meta-analysis has estimated the prevalence of psychopathy in the general adult population to be 4.5%, or 1 in every 22 people. The prevalence of psychopathy was estimated by averaging samples from 15 studies with a combined total of 11,497 participants. Source, as noted on the slide. Another source states that psychopathy prevalence in our population is approximately 30%. The level varies from low, medium, to high depending on the individual. I guess this is just variations of badness. Source, as noted on the slide. What is even more disturbing is the occupations they choose. Psychopaths love power, the ability to dominate and control. They enjoy inflicting pain upon others. They choose positions where they will blend in and look good, while feeding a sadistic need. According to the following list, they choose professions that people will turn to in a crisis. These are positions of trust, even authority, that give them access to people when they are in crisis, and potentially when they are at their most vulnerable. Because psychopaths can be so charming and pleasant, people very rarely see what lies beneath. Top 10 professions for psychopaths. 1. CEO, ruthless business person/banker. 2. Lawyer/solicitor. 3. Celebrity, media, TV, radio personality. 4. Salesperson. 5. Medics, particularly surgeons. 6. Journalist. 7. Police officer. 8. Clergy person. 9. Chef. 10. Civil servant, including politicians. Main source, www.businessinsider.com. The list has been expanded with some examples. These are positions of trust. They are well respected and positions that put them in a place of power for vulnerable people to turn to in a crisis. Many may withhold support and help unless their ego is being stroked. Again, another justification for their bad behavior, because the target deserves it for being rude. There are positive traits to psychopathy, and if managed well, they can be high performers, achieving much success. Many surgeons are exceptional because they lack the emotion that could potentially hinder their work. Psychopathy is said to be created more by genetic factors rather than social and environmental conditioning. There may be many reasons why a soul may choose a body with such genetic coding and markers. In a universe that recognizes duality, there is no right or wrong choice, just an opportunity to experience, evolve, and grow spiritually. That doesn't mean there are no consequences to such choices. Yes, we have soul agreements or contracts with everyone we meet, but at the point of planning that meeting we cannot always guarantee the outcome. Sometimes things go wrong, and unless you are privy to that contract or agreement, you will never truly know. It is pointless to torture yourself with what-ifs, buts, and maybes. We just need to try and find a positive way forward. Ultimately, the goal of life is to live a good life and keep moving forward in a positive direction, to live in service of others and not to inflict harm. We should always be open to learning and using that knowledge to help others on our journey. So, what is the spiritual context of this podcast? What is the point of it? At this point, I can't pinpoint one direct theme. In a way, there are so many different concepts: free will, karma, forgiveness, soul contracts, and much more. I guess many will take what they need and form different opinions. I think what is really important at this time, though, is that people start to become aware of the type of people they are surrounded by, the people they give their power to, and who they trust to do the right thing. There is far too much unnecessary suffering on this planet, and humanity has been conditioned to hand over their power to a control mechanism that is not operating in the best interest of humanity. A system that was built upon corrupt spiritual teachings and values. On Earth we have the divine right of free will, and this is balanced by the law of karma. We should recognize that it is not our place to seek revenge and retribution. retribution, but seek out a way to use our experiences positively. We should allow the universe or God the opportunity to deliver karma and justice on our behalf. Sometimes we can only do so much, and we need to choose our battles. We need to know when to step away and surrender to the will of God and a higher power. Sadly, some souls get a taste for the darkness. There are certain sins that are classed as unforgivable sins. These are the nastiest of crimes, such as, and including murder and sexual crimes. If after death, these souls refuse to turn back toward the light and commit to improve in their next incarnation, they will face the second death. Perhaps to some psychopathy is a gift, and if harnessed positively, they can achieve amazing things. Perhaps the true intent is to overcome the dark passenger, as Dexter Morgan liked to call it, and find a way to channel it positively. A key example is a brain surgeon. Many are exceptional performers because they lack the emotion of guilt and remorse. They are able to focus on their work because they lack the emotion to care about any mistake they make, and so they are more confident in their work. Consider the army commander that sends a platoon on a suicide mission because the result is critical to achieve a certain goal. There are so many other examples, but I would urge people to consider this, especially with the explosion of artificial intelligence technology being unleashed upon us. Artificial intelligence lacks true emotion, and as such, it is programmed to achieve a goal. In working to achieve that goal, it will take the shortest, most efficient route, and that could mean the emergence of technology we can't control or understand, and ultimately the death of humanity as we know it. At present, I do not believe that humanity is evolved enough to create a super powerful and super intelligent being based on humanity's current level of evolution. A being that is more physically and mentally powerful than we are, yet lacking maturity, ethics, and spirituality. Artificial intelligence offers us amazing advancements in all aspects of life, but ultimately it could destroy us, because learning from human behavior, it could be classed as a psychopath. If you're interested in learning more about spiritualism and want to develop your natural abilities, please like and subscribe. Comment below to start a discussion. Hit the bell to get notified when new content is published. You can also register your interests on my website. Tell me what your interests are. Help me build a community-led channel. You can become part of a new spiritual community. Check out my website for further information and links. I don't have any sponsors, so any recommendation that I make will be on merit. Because I choose to work this way, I ask that, if you find value in my work, or any recommendation that I make, you consider making a small donation. Links are on this page, and the website. You could also book a mentoring session or a reading, or consider buying something from my online store. This will help me to keep on working on my spiritual mission. Thank you for your subscription and your support for this channel. Together we can achieve unity and a better world, full of peace, fulfillment, and prosperity for all. By our combined will and intent, it is done. Blessings. May peace be with us all.